This weekend, there were some talks about 5v5 and 6v6, and I'm assuming this came from the recent cancellation of PvP. And this raised some questions about why Overwatch 2 was even released in the first place. I've seen a lot of takes saying that people who want 6v6 back are blinded by nostalgia or looking through rose-tinted glasses, and I don't think they could be more wrong, especially from an ex-tank player's perspective. For those who didn't get the chance to play Overwatch 1, I'm gonna need you to sit this one out. And for the non-tank players, I just need you to listen, because I'm really tired of y'all telling us how we should feel, play, or act towards 5v5 when you can't even fully comprehend why we would have these feelings to begin with. To start off, I just want to share my experience so you know where I'm coming from. I started playing Overwatch in December 2016 when I got it from Christmas. I have over 1,300 hours played across all roles. When I first started, I believe Orisa was just coming out. I played in Bronze. I moved all the way up to Diamond. I played on PC and console. I would consider myself a flex player, but my home role, or the role I get the most satisfaction playing, was tank. I played from late 2016 all the way up until August 2018 when I went to college. That's when I stopped playing on console. When I was on console, I mainly played support, and I got back into Overwatch during 2020 when I got a PC because I needed the game to learn mouse and keyboard on, and I mainly played tank. So all in all, I would call myself a mid-plat player for tank and support, while DPS was my worst role as a tank preferred player and a flex player. Also on tank, I could pretty much play any tank hero except for Ball and Roadhog. I don't want to consider Doom because he was a DPS at first, and I would consider myself a Sigma main. What really got me to love tank was the playstyle. A lot of people were not up for the challenge, but I was one to embrace it. I like being the first line of defense, protecting my team, and making sure nothing gets by. Essentially doing the dirty work. Tanking can be argued as the most crucial role. There was a risk to reward relationship. You got a lot of payoff if you coordinated those big plays correctly. But now you don't get that feeling in this version of the game. Tanking was already such a thankless job, but all that matters was that I held down the fort. That's what I used to call a good tanking game. Now we are left with such a miserable experience where we are taking all the damage and abilities from the enemy team while being called a piece of by my own teammates. We never get any praise for winning, but we get all the blame for losing. It is very unrewarding. Not to mention the pressure we are already under to perform. There's a reason why longtime tank players have left in droves, and this is including myself. I'm someone who will ride something until the wheels fall off, but I had to jump ship because I do not enjoy this version of the game. Keep in mind, I tried to stick with Overwatch from season 1 until season 6. I could not take it anymore. I had to leave. But during the recent season 9 change, I'm like, you know what? Let me give it a try. I gave it a try. I'm still not having fun. So I'm going to list 3 categories, and the first one is being the frustration of tank players, the issue with taking away one tank, and then my problems with this game in general. This will all be for 6v6 and not just based off of nostalgia. So at least this can explain what tank players go through and how they feel, because 5v5 just sucks for us because I'm really tired of no one taking tank players into account. My first point is that our role literally got cut in half, but we gained double the responsibilities. I'm sure if they took away a DPS or support, you wouldn't be a big fan of that change either. I'm sure it would make you want to go back to the previous version as well. I remember when I first started playing, I just felt naked by myself. When I looked to my left, when I looked to my right, it was just me. There was no Ryan to be charging back to take care of the front lines. The same way supports would protect each other was the same relationship that the tanks had. We trusted each other with our lives. And in that same sense, we would lay our lives down for each other. I know I'm sounding like this is war, but that's just how I felt. Tanking was more than just holding up a shield and pressing W. That's why it just gets under my skin so much when people talk about tank with zero experience. It was this one YouTuber, what was his name? Like Kenzo. He was like, oh, tank is the easiest role in the game because you just hold up a shield. You don't even know the fundamentals of tanking. You're just a DPS main. You don't know what it's like. Like, how many times have you seen a Ryan charge a Diva Bomb away from your team? Or a Roadhog being face to face with a Diva Bomb after hooking it to save your team, knowing you had that second tank who could cover you while you were gone? That playstyle is gone. Taking risks like that aren't even worth it because You don't get that type of value or reward for the most part, and you have way too big of a responsibility to not play it safe. Or when you don't play safe or you play a non-popular character, your teammates are throwing you under the bus, even if you played well or even if it paid off. And it changed the playstyles for some characters. You guys completely eliminated the off-tank role and forced all tanks to play like main tanks. Some tanks just aren't good initiators, or some tanks need help to be able to initiate. And then you have some main tanks who struggle. I mean, look at Ryan without Zarya. The moment he puts his shield down, it's a wrap for him. He gets bullied. I haven't even mentioned what the biggest issue of 5v5 is. The counter swapping is a problem that has yet to be addressed by Blizzard directly. This is not a new problem either. It's been happening since at least season 2. And there is no solution besides adding a second tank. When there were 2 tanks, it was harder for your counter to focus you because majority of the time your second tank was there to cover for you. Cover those weaknesses. Cover that ground you couldn't make up or take. If you were Ryan and there was a Bastion, the Bastion still had to worry about that Sigma or that Diva. Now you don't have that. One of the easiest things you can do to win is to shut down the enemy tank. And this goes well beyond the tank versus tank matchups. The entire lobby can shut you down no matter what hero you select. So I'm going to list some examples. Let's say you're starting off as a Diva and the enemy tank is Orisa. You're diving the supports like you're supposed to, and the next thing you see is a Zarya. So you switch to Winston, then an enemy team rolls out a Maga Reaper Bastion comp. In what world is this a fun gameplay loop? You're literally forced to swap at least 3 times, and this does not reward skill, this does not reward strategy at all. But yet, counterpicking is still the way to go if you want to win. And there is no amount of patches you can do to solve this prominent of a problem in this 5v5 format. Just counter the tank leads to very dull gameplay. This is a big reason why the role is so miserable to play. I'm getting my head knocked between a washer and dryer and someone has the nerve to tell me, tank, press W. Meanwhile, no one is dying, no one is helping me put pressure on the front lines. And when I do press W, I get insta-deleted because I got slept, discorded, antied, Junkrat concussed me all up in the freaking air to get sniped by Widow. Now I'm getting tank diff messages when the soldier went 9 for 10. And this is just a PSA. Overwatch is a team-based game, so you can't just rely on one role to do everything. But for that same reason, the tank role is the only role that is expected to make adjustments. And then we wonder why no one really wants to play tank. The queue times are almost instantaneous because look at everything we have to deal with. If it wasn't for that cult following that Doom players have, I'm sure the tank player base would at least drop 40%. Blizzard would have to be offering mythic skins to get people to play tank. And I'm surprised they're still with us with the amount of bugs that Doom has on the regular. And speaking of queue times, Aaron Keller said that he switched to the 5v5 format because of the queue times. And I'm not really going to speak on that because I knew it could get really bad for the higher echelon players, but I don't think that was a necessary evil. And a lot of people love to bring up double shield in the GOATS meta for wanting to remove a tank, but that was only a problem for such a short amount of time compared to the entire game's life cycle. No one wants to bring up before GOATS meta or before double shield, and no one wants to bring up after double shield when that game was kind of dang near perfect. Especially with the free-to-play format, I mean, the barrier to entry is non-existent because what's stopping someone from hopping on the game right now? There's no price tag. Especially with the free-to-play format, I mean, the barrier to entry is non-existent because what's stopping someone from hopping on the game right now? There's no price tag. There's going to be more active players. So that issue's already kind of gone. I mean, you guys basically sent the tank to the Shadow Realm and we still don't have and you still have yet to address how awful this role is and has been. My next categories are the issues that came from removing the tank because there's a lot. I remember when they announced 5v5 and I just had so many questions because a lot of aspects of the game relied on 2 tanks. The first aspect is being the power that the tanks have are now going to be spread out to the other roles, like the DPS passive or the amount of damage supports can deal. There's a reason why damage and heal numbers were so high, so I'm going to talk about that later. The issue where people thought tanks were strong because they were quote-unquote unkillable misses the point that there is now 2 supports for 1 tank and they can doubly focus the soul tank. They can put as much resources and cooldowns into that 1 tank, and this is especially the case with the support passive. Why throw a healer up for yourself when you're going to regen your health in 2 seconds? This is the reason why sleep, Nade, and Discord have become so oppressive towards tanks. There is no second tank, and there are less shields to mitigate those abilities. There are times where the other tank will receive some of those cooldowns, but now you're going to receive all of them for the most part for yourself. Also, some people thought tanks were OP, especially in the earlier seasons, but they kind of needed to be. Otherwise, they wouldn't have stood a chance alone. This is why coming into Overwatch 2, every tank received a health increase and some type of buff in order to withstand being the sole tank. Zarya definitely needed to have 2 bubbles. If not, you pop her personal bubble and now she's defenseless for 8 seconds. Winston definitely needed a secondary fire because he has no type of ranged damage or attack whatsoever. Nothing to close the gap. D.Va definitely needed a 4-second defense matrix because with 2 seconds as a solo tank, that wouldn't really accomplish that much. All the tanks had to get tuned up to be seen as a threat. But there is a difference for us when we're slightly overtuned and we get hit with nerfs, unlike supports, who have been the best role in the game. In the beginning, when supports were weak due to flankers easily taking them down due to the lack of a second tank, who couldn't help them peel against those Genjis and Tracers in the back lines, they just kept giving them buffs. Now all the supports who are released have some type of mobility because they need to be able to protect themselves, which led to heal and mobility creep. This is the same reason why one-shots became oppressive. That's why they had to tune down the sniper's abilities to one-shot. There is no second tank. There are less shields. There is hardly any contest. Because if you swap to focus the snipers in an enemy backline, you just left your team open for free pickings. One of the biggest problems I faced as a solo tank was dealing with multiple threats, like having a Tracer or an Ashe. I simply cannot address both problems. When in 6v6 you could. Also, in 6v6, you could still win team fights being down a player because the game back then involved a lot of strategy, game sense, and it made a much more complex game instead of this deathmatchy game we have now. Because the game is more open and it has more space to move. And this is my segue into my last argument, which is the problem about the game in general. I can argue that Overwatch 2 wasn't even ready for the 5v5 transitions. The only character who got a proper rework was Orisa, and many characters are still getting reworked or major changes right now, 2 years later. This includes, but not limited to, Sombra, Roadhog, Pharah, Widow, and Hanzo. The maps barely had any changes to accommodate 5v5. They are just now, once again after 2 years, reworking maps, and they really only tweaked one. That second point of defender spawn and icon wall where you can't see through the castle, that doesn't count. The only real change they made was to Junkertown first point. Not to mention keeping the same healing and damage numbers for when there was 2 more 450 HP heroes in the game. This is the stuff I'm talking about when I mean that I don't think Blizzard thought this changed through. Then this led to the DPS passive to help reduce those healing numbers and for some reason add more health to everybody even though the sustain was already high at the time. Instead of just nerfing damage and healing numbers across the board like they did to shield health in that October 2020 patch. For a game where they want players to not rely as much on their teammates, they're sure doing the opposite with that DPS passive. Now I'm going to have to rely on my DPS more so we can actually kill things. And as for wanting to give players more agency, maybe we shouldn't, because the matches are so lopsided after how many attempts to prevent that. Not to mention hiding ranks in competitive and trying to reinvent the competitive system wheel when it was completely fine in the first game. Immortalities have completely ruined the game for me outside of the 5v5 change. During season 6, I almost yanked my hair out every time Wife Lever pulled someone or Kiri cleansed. You're out here fighting for 3 minutes during season 6 peak sustain, and the moment someone is about to die, they get saved. Or the amount of times I have used Grab the Flux to only have Lifeweaver grip them or place a pedal down or Bat to use a lamp. The deniabilities kind of need to lead the game. I see comments saying, why shouldn't an ability mitigate an ultimate? When back in the day you only had ultimates to deny the value you would get out of your ultimates. So for example, let's say Soldier just used his visor. Okay, well I just beat it. So they canceled each other out, but they was ultimate versus ultimate versus ultimate versus ability. The only abilities that we really had to quote unquote deny was maybe a Zarya bubble and a Mei wall, but even then it didn't have 3 abilities wrapped into one. It'd be different if Suzu just cleaned all the negative effects, but it doesn't. Why does it grant you a burst of healing and then an extra burst of healing if you do cleanse, and it makes you invulnerable? That's just overkill. Why does Life Grip make you invulnerable, repositions you, and gives you an extra 50 health? It's so annoying to play against. Speaking of annoying to play against, what were y'all thinking when y'all made manga? And at least Ramatra and Junker Queen are fun heroes. And just to name a string of complaints, y'all completely ruined the on fire system. It makes no sense. I don't give a dang about blazing. Why, if I'm on fire and somebody kills me now they're on fire? Doesn't make sense. No more cards at the end of games. There's like 5 different currencies. And to top it off, McCree's grenade sucks. And it doesn't make sense with his hero fantasy. Now that PvP is gone, what was the point of this game? Money? At this point, just bring back Overwatch Classic. And this wouldn't even be the first time Blizzard has made such drastic changes that split the player base. I mean, look at WoW. So you can keep your little 5v5. I just want the option to play the original Overwatch again. Because if I could, I wouldn't even be making this video right now. And just to name a string of complaints, y'all completely ruined the on fire system. It makes no sense. I don't give a dang about blazing. Why, if I'm on fire and somebody kills me now they're on fire? Doesn't make sense. No more cards at the end of games. There's like 5 different currencies. And to top it off, McCree's grenade sucks. And it doesn't make sense with his hero fantasy. Now that PvP is gone, what was the point of this game? Money? At this point, just bring back Overwatch Classic. And this wouldn't even be the first time Blizzard has made such drastic changes that split the player base. I mean, look at WoW. So you can keep your little 5v5. I just want the option to play the original Overwatch again. Because if I could, I wouldn't even be making this video right now. If Blizzard really wants to stick with 5v5, even though they've been trying for 2 years with all these changes, that's fine. Personally, me, I don't think 5v5 can ever be balanced. 5 is already an odd number and one row is going to get the short end of the stick. It has and will be tanked.